Hello and welcome to our penultimate session for today. I'm joined by Brittany Atkins from Hotwire, who's going to be running me. And the session is titled Catalyst for Change, and one of our leaders' insights. I'm looking forward to this, and this is where I'd like to hand over to Brittany.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's such a pleasure to have the opportunity to moderate a panel of some rather formidable women leading the future of mobility across the globe. I'm really excited to see what we can learn in the UK from speakers based in Spain, Israel and the States. So it's a real treat for us today. My name is Brittany Atkins. I lead business development in the UK for Hotwire. Hotwire is a global tech specialist PR and communications consultancy with an expert energy and future of mobility practice. And I'm joined today by Sonia White, Global Brand and Communications Director of Delphi Technologies. Sonia, give us a little wave. Thank you. Orlie Dahan, Executive Director of EcoMotion and founder of the Women in Mobility Network. Hello, Orlie. And Cheryl Thompson, founder and CEO of CADIA, the Centre for Automotive Diversity, Inclusion and Advancement. Hello, Cheryl. I'm sure you'll agree that the past few days of automotive EV has been very exciting and inspiring, and it's fascinating to be witnessing so much innovation in the industry. One thing that is really evident, however, is that the UK automotive industry has some serious catching up to do when it comes to diversity. Whilst automotive is considered a global leader in some areas, particularly when it comes to tech and innovation, we can't ignore the fact that this sector has been very slow to embrace diversity and inclusion changes. If we just take the Auto Express Brit list, for example, which aims to showcase the top 50 individuals within the UK's automotive sector, with industry leaders nominating the very best talent from their organisation, now in its 9th year, it's hugely disappointing to see that in 2020, there are only 6 women on the Brit list and not one person from a BAME background. The shortage of women representatives of the BAME community and other minority groups in this list is reflective of the wider British automotive workforce and reflects the scale of the challenge facing the sector. While most companies have programs that are beginning to help, there's a huge amount still to be done to boost diversity from production lines all the way to the boardroom. The reality is that the scale and pace of innovation in this sector requires a rich diversity of skills, perspectives and experience, and the industry's future success really hinges on our ability to attract the best and brightest talent, irrespective of background, race or gender. We truly do need people from all walks of life to help shape the future of mobility in the UK and indeed globally. So, that's the reason why I'm so excited that we brought this panel here today to get some answers, hopefully, and to give us some tips that we can move forward with. So before we get started on asking questions, I'd like to take the opportunity to invite each of our speakers to briefly introduce themselves, their role and what brings them here today. Orlie, can I ask you to kick us off, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm Orlie Dahan, Director of EcoMotion, which is a smart mobility community of over 6 and 12,000 customers globally. And ago, I founded Women in Mobility Understanding the need to know the number of women in the field. So we have a group here which kind of created waves, started growing globally, and we have our fellow Women in Motion in Germany and another global group of Women in Mobility, which is women from all over, and always to stop opportunities and challenges and grow.
Thank you so much. And Sonia, please can you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so I Applied Technology is a global provider and on the automotive. I'm in communication globally there, and I have been in the automotive and the other industries. So I see what it is to be in this industry, which are mainly finance. So that's why my point was important.
Thank you. And last but not least, Cheryl, can I ask you to introduce yourself quickly?
Yes, Cheryl Thompson, founder and CEO of CADIA, which is the Center for Automotive Diversity, Inclusion, and Advancement. And I have over 34 years in automotive. I started off as a tool and die maker, which is a hands-on trade, went into engineering, and served in a number of different roles through operations, manufacturing, engineering, and leadership. Also spent some time at a tier 1. And with all of that experience, I realized there's so much talent that is just going unnoticed, underutilized, that isn't really being valued as much as it should be. So we put together this organization to really help work on the systemic change that needs to happen, to empower individuals to help with the professional development so that we can see more women and underrepresented minorities step into leadership roles.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. No, but forgive us if we're learning a little with microphones. If you're listening, we need to mute and unmute because there's a little bit of echo and background noise. So this is a good point for me to bring up. If there are any questions you want to ask in the session, please raise them in the chat, and I'll make sure before the end that we get a chance to hear them and ask them and answer them. So first, I'd like to ask the group to, I like being quite provocative with questions. So let's start with addressing the elephant in the room. And men still occupy more than 82% of jobs in the UK automotive sector. How do we ensure that men are both involved and engaged in the conversation in order to support a positive change? Cheryl, I might invite you to answer this one first, please.
Yes, thank you. I love this question because we do need our male allies. And I always talk about allies instead of enemies, right? We want men to come along beside us to be part of the solution. So it starts with identifying the business case. And there's tons of data out there globally about why companies are more profitable when we have diversity on the leadership teams, when companies and teams are more inclusive, right? We know that there's better performance, there's better decision making, there's more innovation and creativity. So first it's educating and making clear the business case. Then step 2 is what is the status, which you've just talked to, what, you know, where we are at in terms of representation in the UK. And then it's outlining what are the barriers, what are the challenges. So you think about things like the likability penalty that women sometimes face. You know, there's a double standard. If we're outspoken in a meeting, we can be called too aggressive, but a man is rewarded for the same thing. Or think about the penalty that we pay for motherhood, where fatherhood is seen as a bonus. Oh, look, he's being such a good father. Or things like informal networks, right? There's so much that can go on in terms of getting access to opportunities from that informal network that goes on. Or things like making sure that women are stepping into roles that are substantive that really position you for the C-suite. So making the men aware of some of those challenges because they don't know, right? And if we bring that to light, we can engage them in helping us solve those problems. So I think that's a great first step.
Thank you, Cheryl. Sonia, I see you nodding. What do you have to say on this?
Yeah, I like Cheryl's intro that that has to be an alliance versus just, you know, women against men. No, it's not like that. You know, it's the business case which comes first. And I really think that we need to look at that as the performance of a team. And that is not just gender, it could be anything. It's all the types of diversity we need. And not only leadership positions, if we go down to the different levels of the organization, we need to have a more balanced approach, I think. And especially in the automotive, which is, in my view, still the very old school industry. I think there is the moment of modernizing the whole industry a little bit, and I think that would give it a facelift. And with that, automatically, I think the question of gender balance, you know, it would just evaporate eventually. And I think also, you know, to have HR involved in this kind of discussions, how to get more females in the leadership positions, I think that's very relevant. Not to involve them at very late stage, get them part of the conversations.
Thank you, Sonia. Orlie, do you have any points to add on that? How do we make sure that men are involved and part of the conversation and helping us to reach a more, diverse and inclusive solution?
Yeah, so I'm the Israeli that always puts the truth in the face. I speak a lot about this to all the startups in the community, and I must say, the more I speak about it, the more they reply, and they talk to me about wanting more women on their team, and actually wanting to see more women also on stage. We decided there are no manuals at the EcoMotion main event. We have a big main event every year, and I work really hard on putting women on stage. And I actually have to talk to their bosses sometimes to make their title higher, because it's only for VPs and C-levels and CEOs. So I sometimes talk to their boss in order to make them, instead of like a research person, like director of. And actually it works for a moment, but at least it creates something, some kind of new wave. I had it, for me, the EcoMotion main event was a great showcase of that, because when I arrived 3 years ago, there was no line to the women's bathroom. And now I'm really proud to say that I stood in line last year, and I was thrilled. And someone even posted it on their story, showing that like this never really happens usually. So it's really putting an emphasis on it.
That's really, really incredible. Cheryl, your point on really seeing men as allies in this, how can we encourage there to be more male allies, or do you have any advice to offer on how to create a male ally from somebody in your organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in the US, a lot of our companies have employee resource groups. And I don't know if that is the case around the world, but these employee resource groups have been really good in terms of attracting men to join them, so they can become educated about some of the challenges. And then that enrolls them to serve as mentors or to serve as sponsors. So there's a slight difference between mentorship and sponsorship. So mentorship is somebody who is talking to you, sharing their experiences, giving you some advice about maybe some next positions to take on, recommendations on how to get more visibility and exposure. But sponsors are a little bit different in that they are the ones that are advocating for you behind the scenes. So they're in the rooms that you're not yet in, and they're able to recommend you for higher positions. So I think it's really boils down to having them join those employee resource groups as allies. Some companies even have employee resource groups that are just men as allies. And then lastly, there's an organization here in the US in Michigan, I'm in Detroit, Michigan, called Inforum, and they actually have a roundtable for men as allies, where men from different companies can join and have conversations about this, so they can learn what other companies are doing.
Fantastic, thank you, Cheryl. And Sonia, do you have any ideas from a marketing perspective? Like, how can we encourage? I'd love to know in this session right now what the gender split is on the audience, and I'll write a blog at the end of the event, and I'll see if Sean and the event organisers can let us know. I know when I've previously hosted and organised events on diversity, it's great to see lots of passionate women turn up. But I look around and I think, I want there to be men here in this discussion too. How, have you got any ideas from a marketing perspective on how we can ensure that this is a conversation for everyone?
Well, I guess for male leaders, what really triggers that decision is numbers, right? Performance. I mean, I guess if we go back to what we said in the beginning, is if you look at the performance of well-balanced teams and put this into perspective versus a purely male-driven team, I think the numbers would speak. So I think that that's from a marketing perspective very important that they see that you thrive better in a multicultural, multi-diverse environment. I think also when we look at the culture of the company and how you sell the company you work for, I think that's very important because cultures and the values of the culture have been sometimes set in the 80s or in the 90s, whatever. You have to go with what it is the 21st century and embrace the trends and the new era a little bit and make sure you embrace the younger talents, the young generations. So I think that that's very important with that. I think you include the men in the discussion from an innovation standpoint. I think that's the way to go.
I couldn't agree more with Sonia. I think it's a lot about, I feel like professionally inside the automotive transportation, we rebranded it to mobility, but we haven't done it yet to the world. And you know, transportation, automotive today is not about a steering wheel and a gearbox. It's about technology. It's about making an impact. It's about creativity. And it's a lot of things that women can bring a lot to the table in this shift. So I think it's also about, you know, sharing that with the world and sharing that in ads, which, you know, women can be beautiful and create the car, not only sit in it and, you know, we've evolved from this world. So once we start discussing mobility as the new futuristic technology, then I feel like this will be more inclusive.
I might be biased, but coming from the PR agency, I like that the answer is we need to rebrand the mobility industry. I'm like, yes, we'll take the challenge on. I love that answer.
Already professionally, but it's not out to the world.
I fully agree, and Orlie, I hear you really. It's what we see when you look at the automotive industry in specific. You have the big car makers. They come up with these new trends, autonomous driving and electrified vehicles. I mean, this is all new generation, which is amazing. But then if you look at, that's the front end, what hits the markets. But if you look at the facade behind, the industry itself behind, again, it's not an innovative within the own boundaries of how you set up a company. It's still behind some of, you know, companies that are in the 21st century. So again, innovation, creativity, and you know, get there.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And interestingly, so I asked the question earlier on, like, I'd love to know if we had more men or more women on the you know, listening in at the moment. And our lovely event organisers have managed to give me some information that there's more men than women currently that are tuned in. Which at first I thought, oh, that's brilliant. This never happens when I host diversity events. But then I also thought, well, maybe also, I don't know how many female attendees we have at the show. So yeah, I'm definitely going to try and find out the stats at the end and share them afterwards. I'd like to, I think our next question follows on quite nicely from the point you were making, Sonia. So Sonia, I think I'm going to open this question to you first. Many steps have been taken in recent years to highlight the lack of women in senior leadership roles, yet there are still so few. According to some research in 2018, at Ford, only 2 of the 16 board members were female. Fiat had somewhat better ratios, with women accounting for 27% of their board members. However, there was just 1 female on the 8-member board of BMW, and Toyota had not 1 woman present across its all-male leadership of 9 board members and 44 senior execs. I mean, you know, these are statistics that are a couple of years old now, but there's been very little data or evidence to suggest that things have changed for the better in the past 2 years. So my question to you, Sonia, to start us off, please, is what would it take for us to achieve real and long-lasting change?
That's a very good question, Brittany. I think it's twofold. I think one is making the industry more attractive. So again, it's mainly male dominated. So if you're a young graduate, would you really like to join a male dominated environment? Maybe, maybe not, right? So I think it's that moment of making the industry a little bit more attractive to really have more females and young talents to go into this industry and to be really interested in joining. So I think there's new cars and new innovations coming out. I think it will make their bit as well. But again, coming to the point, we need to modernize within the company, in the industry themselves. I think that's the first point. Secondly, I think when you look at the requirements of female leadership of positions per se, I think you need to open that a little bit and have some mutual job ads without being too restrictive. So when you look at the job ads, you have maybe 10, 15 very precise requirements, right? A male would the tendency say, maybe 5 out of 10 or 6 out of 10, I'll apply, I'll do that, right? The female reaction would be, oh my gosh, maybe 5, I will never be able to get the job, so I will not apply for that. So also the way how we sell the industry and have a long-term effect. Go back and do your homework, how you make job ads, how you are more flexible, how they appeal for both genders a little bit, and for any background, and as a matter of fact. They are very traditional written. Make them more flexible, right? Women might not necessarily want to have a higher paid job, but they want more flexibility behind. So, is that bit of making a difference? So that would be my take.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Cheryl, it looks like you might have a comment to follow up on that. What can we do for real and long-lasting change, looking at those statistics, which are really quite pitiful at the moment?
Yeah, so the good news is the investors are looking at this. So you've got Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, Vanguard, who have all made public statements, and I'm sure there's more that I'm forgetting, but they've all made public statements about wanting to see more diversity on the boards, or they're going to pull their investments, or they're not going to fund an IPO. So that's really where it needs to start, because then the boards get more diverse, and then the boards put the pressure on the C-suites. And it has to be really, really intentional. And I agree with everything that Sonia mentioned. In addition to what Sonia said, I think we have to think about succession planning really with intention. So what experiences are required to get to the C-suite? So that often means roles that have profit and loss responsibility, operational roles, like knowing how the business makes money, or customer-facing roles. Too often, women are relegated to HR or more administrative or support roles. And, maybe they feel like they're not qualified. Maybe there's a bias where other people don't feel they're qualified, but we have to get past that. And we have to, as women and underrepresented minorities, step into those positions and have the support that's needed. I would say, if we want different results, we have to be willing to do things we haven't done before. And this industry hasn't been very flexible in the past. With COVID, we're all seeing that it is possible to work remotely and be successful. So what can we take from what we've learned and apply it to the future? And then making our environments and cultures more welcoming and inviting and inclusive. I could talk about this for an hour, but I'll stop there.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Cheryl. And Orlie, do you have a point on that? I know we was WhatsApping this morning about one particular example, talking about why is the female face always in an HR position, or a position where we see them more often?
Yeah, I sent Brittany the FCA management page, and there were all men except for the HR, which was a woman, and that made me want to go work for them just to break that glass ceiling, because I feel like it's becoming a crime these days already, that it's so much not aligned with the world we're living in and the times that we're living in. And I feel like in this new world of mobility, where I know the automotive industry used to be, we do everything in-house, and everything is very secretive and closed. And we're looking at this world of synergies and how everyone can put something down at the table, and together we make a better, greater world. And this is this is a woman language. I feel like women are going to bring so much to that table, especially when OEMs and tier ones are understanding now they're not going to make this fast, rapidly growing era by doing everything in-house. They have to start collaborating and have to start caring. And I couldn't agree more with what Sonia and Cheryl said. And according to what Sonia said, it's not only the number of requirements that you're asking for, it's even the number of years you're asking for experience. I feel like job descriptions, they're not an opening of negotiation point. You need to lay it down as you want it, actually, because even if it's not all the requirements, but a woman can have all of them, but she has 3 years instead of 5 years that is asked, or even 4.5 years, other than 5 years that is asked, she's not going to apply. So the descriptions need to be as wanted in the end and not as a starting point.
Yeah, and I just want to add one point to that. I think that's really important. And also thinking about asking for what we need. So if we see a job description and it says 40% travel required, a woman would probably say, oh, you know, I can't travel that much. I'm not going to apply for this job. But a man is more likely to say, well, I can't travel 40%. I'm qualified for this job. I'm going to apply for it and tell them I can only travel 20% of the time. So he's willing to ask for what he needs. And I think we have to start doing that more so, asking for the accommodations that we need.
Completely. To change also the how women approach a negotiation.
Yes.
This is one of the things that in Women in Mobility, we started, discussing mobility things. And then I said, let's start giving tools. And I was looking for someone to come. Someone gave us a lecture on how to publicly speak, because I want to see more women on stages. Because if women in the audience won't see women on stage, it won't happen. They won't see it as a prospective future. And the other thing that I want to do next is a negotiation class, in order to negotiate even salaries or even titles or these little things that sometimes a woman might put aside and not stress because of the fear of losing the position. But it's actually very important for the future and for all women. It's not just for one.
There's a nice example that I just want to offer quickly as well, of talking about kind of about job specs and interviews, because I think we think a lot about, and probably still not enough about, how do we remove unconscious bias from the recruitment process very early on, and you don't necessarily think about the actual interview itself. And I think this is an example from HSBC, so in the banking world. But they make sure that they have diverse interview panels, and because it's so easy to, form and connect to and trust somebody that's very similar to yourself. If you're an undiverse panel, how are you gonna pick somebody that looks or sounds or acts or talks differently to yourself? Without being really, really, really mindful of that. So just by having a more diverse panel, I think that's a nice offer as well, to make sure that if you're managing to succeed to get a diverse range of applicants interview, that they actually have a fair process, and that you broaden your own mind collectively to make sure that they have an opportunity to get the role as well. This leads, because we're talking about talent and recruitment, this leads really nicely into my next question. How does the industry identify, encourage, and develop young talent? And how do we encourage more women and individuals from varying backgrounds into the industry? Cheryl, I think what you do at CADIA would be perfect to start with you, please.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on what you were talking about with the diversity on interview panels. So also having diversity on the candidate slates. So, a lot of companies now have the practice of rejecting a candidate slate if there's no diversity in it. So having the diversity on the interview side, on the candidate side, and then doing some education on unconscious bias, like you were talking about. There's similarity bias, affinity bias, halo, horn, attribute, like there's all of that. And making sure all of the hiring managers, all of the recruiters, all of HR have that training, but then there's some way to refresh everybody. So maybe it's like a one-pager cheat sheet to say, here's some reminders on what to look for. In terms of attracting more diverse talent to the industry, I think it's making people aware. It's changed. It's transformed. It has a facelift. I think Sonia had mentioned in the beginning, we have to modernize the industry, and it is modernized, but people don't know it. It is seen still in many ways as dark, dingy, and dangerous, and it's clearly not. So how do we get students to come into the workplaces, do an open house, do a tour, serve as mentors to some of the talent pipelines that we're trying to develop, to let them know this is an exciting industry and it's very lucrative. I mean, you can make a really good income, and you don't have to stay in one functional area. So there's product development, there's manufacturing, there's operations, there's HR, there's marketing, there's strategy, right? The industry is just so wide. So education on what the opportunities are is key. And we can't start too young.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Orlie, what do you see, with the exciting founders of different startups and, EcoMotion at the event? What have you learned from, all of that world about encouraging and developing young talent, and how do we encourage more women and individuals from BAME backgrounds into the future of mobility industry?
If I learned something, it's that it starts very early on, and we need to start speaking to all ages, and like opening the doors for them. What we did with Women in Mobility here in Israel, we did an open day for all students in a university, but we invited all students from all over Israel, and we did a all-female explanation on mobility, giving different aspects of it. So explaining that it's also about electric mobility, and it can be for engineers, but you don't have to be an engineer. You can be a coder, but you don't have to be a coder. You can be this, and shared mobility, and giving kind of different snapshots of what mobility means today, and traffic management, and maybe you're very enthusiastic about micromobility, and showing how it's really not only the vehicle itself, but many other forms, and widening and the state of mind of when you think of mobility, what it brings to you, and the opportunities that are out there, and creating job engines. We just did a job engine for all the open positions in mobility to share with everyone and to kind of expand and broaden it.
Brilliant. And Sonia, what do you think in terms of developing young talent and attracting a more diverse range of individuals into this industry?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Cheryl and Orlie said. It's again about modernization and making the industry more attractive to young talents, no matter what background they are. I think it's also a call for action for the industry to collaborate more with universities and institutions to actually make internships easier, to encourage young females, for instance, to go more into tech, to go more into engineering, to lose that fear this is a male-dominated area. No, this is past. This is really, really interesting, because when you're in engineering, you can diversify your career. You can be anything eventually. Right? You can study in engineering, you go to business development, you can be in HR. So it's not set in boxes anymore nowadays, right? So I think it's that beauty in this industry. You can learn that, but you can become that, because it's a very open environment. And I think that we need to be very clear on how we communicate that to the young talents. And it's not just these obvious functions, as I think Orlie said before. It's not only HR or marketing, communications. No, there are so many opportunities. And I think what we said before is we are here to create a better world, and with the cars of the future is such an opportunity to do that, to change that. I mean, it couldn't be more attractive, to be honest, right? To be part of that journey.
That's brilliant, and I hope this panel is evidence that there is space for women in the industry to, you know, build fantastic careers and make impact and have a voice as well. I thought it might be nice to quickly add in, like, Cheryl, what has brought you to automotive? You know, I'm thinking we perhaps all have a personal experience to share here on, you know, how did we end up in the roles that we're in today?
Yes, I certainly fell into this role. I had not planned to go into automotive. I had plans to go to college and learn computers. This was back in the 80s. And I ended up having my son when I was 18. So I got pregnant at 17. I was waitressing, and my dad was an engineer at Ford Motor Company. And he knew that Ford Motor Company had a food service department. And so he said, why don't you apply? Maybe they'll pay for your healthcare and education. So I did, and they hired me on the spot. And they gave me an apron and said, can you start right now? And so I started off washing dishes. So back, and this was 1986, they were trying to recruit women and minorities into the skilled trades. And so I raised my hand because it was going to be a lot more money than I had been making in the food service. And so that got me to do a tool and die apprenticeship and gave me the foundation for engineering. So I fell into it and then just really fell in love with it. You know, the ability to make things was just so cool.
Thank you, Cheryl. Orlie, and what brought you to the future of mobility space, or is keeping you there today?
Well, I'm actually a mobility nerd. I couldn't wait until I'm 16 to get a motorcycle license. I loved old-fashioned cars always. In the Army, I was in the aviation in the Air Force, and when I finished my BA, I founded electric motorcycle company. So I was the first female entrepreneur in the community I lead today. And before what I'm doing now, I used to represent the Israeli transport sector in the European Commission and in Europe for joint R&D. And I love everything about it. I'm very passionate about it. And but women in mobility, you know, it's not like someone asked me to do it. And I feel like it's our role. Everyone who's watching and everyone who's speaking and all over the world, it's not like, you know, oh, someone should do something about it. We should all see what we can do about it, and we should all see how we can bring our part into it and, you know, just do it and do something. Because we see that, you know, diversity can just bring more color and more voices into this whole world that needs a lot more creativity.
Thank you so much, Orlie. And Sonia, how did you end up, you know, working in this space? What keeps you here?
Yeah, well, I sort of fell into that, like Cheryl, a little bit. I was in the transportation industry, and the automotive came just a few years ago. And however, I fell in love with it because it's moving in the right direction, and I really think that we can shape it as a more diverse culture behind. We can shape it the way we need to have it in the future, because right now, as said, the majority is still very white, led environment. So we need to break that through, and it takes female role models also for the younger. And I think just this panel here, if an 18-year-old would see that, she would feel so encouraged, I think, to take that step into this industry, while maybe 10, 15 years ago, there would be this panel out of 5 male. So you see, I think that's what keeps me in this industry. It's very buzzing, very.
Like at least, well, 3 out of 4 of us kind of fell into this space, but quickly fell in love with it. So maybe we just have work to do on just making it more visible as an option, because very quickly you could have candidates really fall in love with the industry that you're a part of and want to be a part of it. If we just do that first bit of work. So we're coming to the end of our session. If anybody's got questions, please make sure you put them in the chat, and I'll make sure we ask them before the end of the session. But I'd love to close on a few kind of pearls of wisdom. We've highlighted a lot about the problem and if we can fix the issue, what that might mean for the industry, but how do we get there? So Sonia, I want to start off with you. From a marketing perspective, how best can we champion diverse talent?
So I guess it's really a matter of giving equal opportunities. Again, giving at the base, no matter what ethnic background, no matter what gender you are, or even what age you are, give equality and fairness and inclusion. I think that's very important. And that's what I'm very passionate about, to have equal opportunities. So that's, I think, where we need to go. And I think also the unconscious bias mindset. This is something, like what Cheryl said, give them a cheat sheet, right? When they go through the interview process, and really have them aware, oh my gosh, yes, this is a flag here. I forgot about that, right? The background conversations happening here. No, we need to be neutralizing all these kind of things. And it's very difficult because sometimes even as females, you have that. And it's not just the males, it's on the female side as well. So yeah, I think that's for me a very, very important step to take.
Thank you so much. And Cheryl, from maybe perhaps from a training and development perspective, how can we best champion diverse talent, please?
Well, when you said pearl of wisdom, there's a
Give
video.
me a whole string. Give me a whole string. Don't stop at one.
Yes. So in the US, there's a video called Pearl, P-U-R-L, by Pixar. It's a short film. If you haven't seen it, this is something that everyone from the dominant group needs to watch. So P-U-R-L. And it does such a good job of showing the experience a woman or a underrepresented person can have coming into a company where you're the only one. So I would start with that. And then secondly, if you're in that dominant group, make some space at the table for others. Make some space for people to talk, be heard, and encourage them. And if you're from the non-dominant group, like step up, step in, and take up some space. So make some space and take up some space are my two pieces of wisdom.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And I will definitely be watching Pearl.
Oh, it's awesome. I love it.
Perfect. And Orlie, how about yourself? From maybe from like an ecosystem perspective, how can we best champion diverse talent in the industry?
Make a point of it. Reach out. If women are less to apply for a job, have your headhunter or HR work on bringing more women to the table. If men apply more to speaking slots, make a point of reaching out and looking for more women. It's harder. It will give you more work, but in the end, it will pay off, and it's going to be beautiful. So I think it's worth the effort of making a point of it and looking at it. I started putting the numbers of percentage of women at the event and following it and speaking about it, and making a point of it really works.
Orlie, I love that, and I feel like I'm quite similar in my attitude towards it. That I really push all female panel events as much as possible, because for so long we had just all male events, and the ideal obviously is to have a 50-50 split. But I think maybe at the moment the time is to make a point of it and make sure that everybody understands it. Yeah, I'm looking at the time. Before we end, I'd love to say a really big thank you to everyone for attending the session and listening, and as well as our industry experts from Delphi, from EcoMotion and from CADIA for sharing their experiences and insights. And lastly, great timing for Sean to jump in. A huge thanks to Automotive EV for organising this session and encouraging the conversation and collaboration to tackle this critically important issue. And you provide a platform for a really important conversation, so thank you so much. If anybody would like to speak with me on this subject further, please get in touch with me on LinkedIn. My name is Brittany Atkins and I work for Hotwire. Sonia, if anybody wants to continue the conversation with themselves, how can they best reach you, please?
LinkedIn, Sonia White. I don't think there are many Sonia Whites on LinkedIn, but if there are, Delphi Technologies is the company.
And yourself, Cheryl?
LinkedIn or Cheryl at automotivediversity.org.
Perfect, thank you. And Orlie. Sorry, Orlie, repeat that, please.
Yeah, same. LinkedIn is great. I'm a bit slow there, but I'm trying to keep up. Orlie Dahan.
I'd just love to say thank you very much to all of you. It's been our absolute pleasure to host you here and to discuss what is a really important conversation. It feels like there is some ground being made within the conversation, but we do need to continue it. You've given me some great food for thought there, really, on how I get involved in the conversation, and that I'm actually part of it. And so thank you all for that. I'll definitely seek out Pearl as well and watch that with my two young girls, and really kind of hoping that this is the movement that we really kind of get there, and we don't have to have this discussion for the next 20 years.
Well, thank you, Sean, for making space, and it was our pleasure to take up space.
No, fantastic.
Taking that from Cheryl.
So, thank you very much, all of you, and a special thank you, Brittany, for holding and leading this panel.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for watching.
Bye.
Bye-bye.